Okay, last one, and I am not even going to promise to keep this short because I am apparently just really bad at keeping things short. So I'm going to run through the list of authors that we have on the presentation list and give you a little sense of who they are, like one or two sentences, so that maybe that can help you decide. But if you have questions, just email me or get in touch with me. If you're like, oh, I was thinking about so and so, that's fine. And also, if you have somebody that you want to propose, um, that's fine too. There are authors that I will say no to for various reasons, but I'm willing to be somewhat flexible. All right, so Margaret Atwood, still alive. She is she's an author who moves between genres, but she has some works that are very, very definitely sci-fi. The primary one being *Handmaid's Tale*, but also the Oryx and Crake, *Year of the Flood*, *MaddAddam*. I think it's called the *MaddAddam* trilogy, and the *Testaments*, which is the sequel to *Handmaid's Tale*. She, as we discussed, or as we looked at with the syllabus, she does not self-identify as a science fiction author, which means she did not get to be a science text in this course. Isaac Asimov, largely 50s science fiction writer, sort of, I would say, hard sci-fi. That's known for, like, he's a really foundational space science fiction writer, and like I said, had handsy. But J.G. Ballard, British science fiction author, near future sci-fi generally. Some of what we would now consider a climate sci-fi or cli-fi. I hate that term, but there it is. Really, really gritty stuff. I haven't read a ton of Ballard, but I like what I've read. Although it doesn't necessarily make you feel good about life. Ray Bradbury, another sort of seminal mid 20th century science fiction writer, all over the place. Fantasy, horror, science fiction, a lot of short stuff. Really good, and as far as I know, a decent person. Octavia Butler, fantastic black science fiction author. And even saying science fiction is probably limited. She has like vampire novels. She has really, really prescient near future novels, and she is some of her work is within the tradition of what we would call either Afrofuturism or African futurism. Great stuff. Raymond Chandler, early 20th century detective noir. Likewise, Dashiell Hammett, who I didn't put on the list. Ha, okay, never mind. So, Raymond Chandler. Yeah, sort of your classic like private eye fiction. Samuel Delany, still alive. Black, queer, sci-fi author. A lot of space opera-y stuff. Also a really bizarre, one of my favorite science fiction books called Dahlgren, which you should totally read, except that it is 900 pages long. Philip K. Dick, sort of later, sort of more of a new wave science fiction guy. A lot of really high concept stuff, a lot of stuff about cognition, about drugs, about alternate universes. He is the one who wrote the story that Blade Runner is based on. He's great. He's weird. William Gibson, cyberpunk. His big one is his sort of classic work is Neuromancer. He is credited with inventing the term cyberspace. If you have seen The Matrix, it owes a deep, deep debt to William Gibson. Still working, does really good. Now more what we would call speculative fiction, but he is like the sort of father of cyberpunk. Robert Heinlein. I haven't read that much Heinlein. Sort of in the same, in between, I would say Asimov and Philip K. Dick, so like early 60s, but starting to do more experimental sci-fi, like weird sexy time stuff and aliens. Frank Herbert wrote Dune, which was 1964. It's a huge, massive novel followed by other novels. It's about resource scarcity and highly influential science fiction writer. Patricia Highsmith, crime writer, queer white author. Again, mid 20th century stuff mostly. If you know her, you might know her from. She wrote The Talented Mr. Ripley. She wrote Strangers on a Train, and she wrote the story that became a movie that I don't remember the name of. The book is called The Price of Salt. I feel like the movie might just be called Carol. Anyways, she's a great writer, amazing writer. By all accounts, kind of a terrible person with a penchant for seducing her friends' wives. Chester Himes, black noir writer, early 60s. Not someone I've read a lot of, but is sort of like highly regarded black detective fiction writer. And I should have had a list of his books in front of me. Shirley Jackson, again, mid 20th century. Best known for The Lottery, but her other big one is The Haunting of Hill House, which I will probably read the first paragraph of to you aloud when we get to horror, because it is one of the best first paragraphs of any novel ever. So she writes some things that are sci-fi, some things that are horror. We've Always Lived in the Castle, which is a straight-up gothic and is one of my dearest favorite books. Beverly Jenkins is a black historical romance writer. And I did read one of her books just like a couple weeks ago, and it's called Forbidden, and it was really good. But she is, when I asked who were sort of canonical romance writers, Beverly Jenkins, aside from people who just were like, we need to talk about the canon in romance, Beverly Jenkins was a name that came up a lot. Stephen King, you know who Stephen King is. I may not let anybody do a report on Stephen King. I'm deciding. Sandra Kitt is another romance writer, sort of classic romance writer. And again, I'm teaching myself romance as we go along, so I'm sorry that I can't speak more to these writers. Ursula K. Le Guin, so good. We have the same birthday. Science fiction writer, one of the earliest sort of big female sci-fi writers. She's all over the place. She does a lot of space opera stuff. She has a series of like YA aimed fantasy novels that I've always thought that the Harry Potter novels owe a certain debt to. She's also really great at writing about writing, and we will talk at least about one of her essays. And I will probably make you guys read Those Who Walk Away from Omelas at some point, because it's just so good. Or if I don't make you read it, I'll just guilt you into reading it. H.P. Lovecraft. We may strike Lovecraft from the list too. We are going to read The Horror at Red Hook, which is like the worst. But he does what is kind of called cosmic horror. He's not the only one. He's writing mostly in the 20s. He is not the only one to do that. He is actually in a tradition, although he invents a lot of that tradition for himself. And your mileage may vary. But we will talk a whole lot about Lovecraft, and I might sort of discourage people from doing him as a presentation, because I might end up having to do the presentation. So we'll consider that. Michael Moorcock. Weird dude. Weird British dude. Fantasy and sci-fi. His major series that people talk about are the Elric series, which is like this albino hero, and the Jersey Cornelius books, which I really like, which are sort of like James Bond on drugs. Lots and lots of drugs. Weird writer, really fun. Kim Stanley Robinson, a really great cli-fi writer. Again, that sort of climate fiction is kind of what he is known for. Writing about the implications, like projecting the implications of this road that we are on. Joanna Russ, feminist sci-fi author. Her big, sort of most influential work is The Female Man. Really experimental author within the science fiction tradition. And I mean experimental at like a textual level, like what the text actually does. Those books are fantastic. Danielle Steele, romance writer, sort of huge in the 80s. Like my mom read a lot of Danielle Steele. Yeah, super important to the history of romance, but straight white woman. Jim Thompson, noir writer, really messed up, really dark stuff. He wrote The Grifters, The Killer Inside Me, Population 1240, which is really good. But they are dark noir books. He has a tendency to like follow the bad guy rather than follow the detective that catches them. James Tiptree Jr. That is a pen name, and I cannot think of the author's actual name. I'm doing the thing. Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm messing it up. All right. Sort of later science fiction writer, not someone I know a lot about. If she's someone who's of interest to you, I'm happy to sort of do a little little more preliminary legwork and look into that. Connie Willis, really great active sci-fi writer, but considered a grandmaster, which is a term. A lot of these genres have people that are considered grandmasters like that. She writes all over the place too. A lot of really good time travel stuff and alt history stuff. Super cool. I once beat her in a trivia game. Gene Wolfe moves between sci-fi and fantasy. Sort of best known for his fantasy stuff. Although it's the kind of fantasy that you could argue is sci-fi, or you could argue it's second world sci-fi or second world fantasy. His books tend to be bigger, but he has short story collections too. And Kathleen E. Woodiwiss. She kind of, she's a romance writer. She kind of, I don't want to say creates the idea of the historical romance, but she is kind of a game changer when it comes to what what the romance genre does and what it means. That's it. That's the list. You'll notice certain people aren't on there. J.K. Rowling is not on there. Neil Gaiman is not on there. Those seem like gimmies, and I will probably take Stephen King off for that same reason, because I do want you guys to engage with somebody that you're not super familiar with. That's it. That's the list. I will happily field questions about any of those authors to the extent that I know those authors, and that extent varies. Thanks.